You ever notice how the harder someone tries to bury the truth, the louder it echoes? Funny, isn't it? They tell you silence is peace. They tell you obedience is safety. They tell you to stop asking questions, stop looking behind the curtain, stop connecting the dots. Why? Because some secrets are too expensive to protect with words alone. Some secrets demand sacrifice. Some secrets leave stains that never wash away. They thought fear would erase the evidence. They thought blood would rewrite the story. But here's the joke. Blood doesn't hide the truth. It feeds it. Every drop becomes another witness. Every attempt to cover it up only makes people wonder what was worth killing for in the first place. Welcome to a world where the masks are smiling, the headlines are polished, and the lies are dressed like heroes. But underneath the makeup, underneath the applause, something is leaking through the cracks. Something they can no longer control. Today's message is called dice. They spilled blood to hide this, but it's already running. This isn't about blind belief or easy answers. It's about questioning what you're told, recognizing how power can shape narratives, and understanding that truth has a strange habit of surviving, even when people try desperately to bury it. So sit back, keep your mind open, and remember, the funniest joke of all is believing the truth stays dead just because someone tried to bury it. They always tell you the truth is simple. Funny, because the moment you start asking simple questions, everyone suddenly becomes very complicated. Doors close. Smiles fade. Voices get quieter. The people who laughed with you yesterday begin looking over their shoulders today. Isn't that strange? It's almost as if questions are more dangerous than weapons. A weapon can hurt a body, but a question can shake an entire kingdom built on comfortable lies. Most people don't reject the truth because it's false. They reject it because it threatens the story they've been living. We love neat endings, familiar faces, and promises that everything is under control. We paint the walls, polish the floors, and pretend the cracks don't exist. But cracks don't disappear just because you stop looking at them. They wait. They spread. And one day they become impossible to ignore. Imagine a stage where every actor knows their lines. The audience claps at the right moments. The lights shine exactly where they're supposed to, and everyone leaves believing they witnessed reality. But what happens when someone accidentally wanders backstage? Suddenly the magic isn't magic anymore. The monsters are actors. The kings borrow their crowns. The heroes rehearse their speeches. The illusion survives only because nobody is supposed to look behind the curtain. That's the funny thing about hidden truths. They don't always stay hidden because they're impossible to find. Sometimes they stay hidden because people are too busy, too afraid, or too comfortable to search. It's easier to accept the script than to question the director. Easier to repeat what everyone else believes than to risk standing alone. Comfort has a way of dressing itself like wisdom. Fear plays its part beautifully. Not always the loud kind. Not sirens, explosions, or dramatic threats. The quiet kind. The fear of being mocked. The fear of losing friends. The fear of asking a question everyone else avoids. That fear is elegant. Invisible. It doesn't need chains because people build their own cages and lock the doors from the inside. Then there are the storytellers. Every world has them. Some tell stories to inspire hope. Others tell stories to protect power. The difference isn't always obvious at first. A polished lie can sound more comforting than an uncomfortable truth. It arrives dressed in confidence, carrying perfect words, while the truth stumbles into the room covered in dust, exhausted from being ignored. Which one do you think people welcome first? But here's the secret no one likes to admit. Truth is patient. It doesn't panic. It doesn't beg for attention. It simply waits. It waits while people argue. It waits while rumors spread. It waits while masks become heavier to wear. Time has a cruel sense of humor. The longer an illusion survives, the more spectacular its collapse can become. Look around. Every person you meet believes they see the whole picture. Yet everyone is holding only a single puzzle piece. We argue over colors without realizing the image is incomplete. Pride convinces us we already know enough. Curiosity whispers that maybe, just maybe, there's more. And curiosity has always been the enemy of comfortable deception. So don't mistake mystery for certainty. Don't confuse confidence with proof. Ask questions. Listen carefully. Examine what you hear before deciding what to believe. Some stories deserve skepticism, others deserve evidence, and all deserve thoughtful consideration. That's how real understanding begins. Not with blind acceptance, but with an open mind willing to separate fact from fiction. Because in the end, the greatest joke isn't that people try to bury the truth. The greatest joke is watching them realize the truth never needed permission to exist. And when the punchline finally lands, don't laugh too early. The joker always saves the loudest laugh for the very end ducks. Fear doesn't always arrive wearing a monster's face. Sometimes it walks into the room dressed like common sense. It whispers instead of screams. It smiles instead of threatens. It tells people to stay quiet, to keep their heads down, to avoid asking uncomfortable questions because life is easier that way. And the strange part, most people don't even realize they're listening to it. They think the voice belongs to them. The world has always understood one simple rule. A frightened mind is easier to control than a curious one. Fear makes people stop exploring. It convinces them that uncertainty is more dangerous than ignorance. Once that seed is planted, it grows without anyone noticing. Soon, people begin policing themselves. No one has to build walls around them. They build the walls from the inside, brick by brick, until they forget the sky was ever visible. Think about it. How many dreams have disappeared because someone feared failure? How many voices have gone silent because they feared judgment? How many questions have remained unasked because people feared looking foolish? Fear doesn't need chains. It simply needs imagination. The mind does the rest. That's what makes it such a brilliant weapon. A sword can only reach the person standing in front of it. Fear travels much farther. It passes from one conversation to another, from one generation to the next. It changes the way people think before they even realize they've stopped thinking for themselves. They start choosing safety over truth, comfort over growth, silence over honesty. Not because someone forced them to, but because fear convinced them it was their own decision. Imagine a city where every window is covered by thick curtains. Nobody can see outside, yet everyone insists they know exactly what's happening beyond the glass. Why? Because someone told them opening the curtain was dangerous. After a while, nobody remembers who started the rumor. They simply inherit it. Fear doesn't always need evidence. Sometimes repetition is enough. The funniest part is that fear often disguises itself as responsibility. It tells you to play it safe, to never challenge accepted ideas, to never stand apart from the crowd, blend in, agree, smile, stay invisible. After all, the tallest tree is the first one struck by lightning, or so they say. But what they forget to mention is that the tallest tree also reaches the most sunlight. Power, whether in a workplace, a community, or any group, can sometimes benefit when people stop asking questions. That's why critical thinking matters. Not because every authority is dishonest, but because healthy skepticism helps separate evidence from assumption. A society that values thoughtful questions is stronger than one that relies only on unquestioned certainty. Fear also has a strange relationship with imagination. It borrows tomorrow's problems and drags them into today. It creates disasters that haven't happened, enemies that don't exist, and endings that were never written. It convinces people to surrender before the game even begins. And then it sits back and laughs while they celebrate surviving battles they never actually fought. But courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is looking fear in the eyes and refusing to let it write your story. It's admitting you don't know everything while still being willing to learn. It's asking difficult questions without assuming easy answers. It's choosing understanding over panic and evidence over rumor. The truth is, fear loses its grip the moment light enters the room. Not because every mystery disappears, but because people begin thinking instead of merely reacting. The shadows become smaller. The monsters become less certain. The whispers lose their power. Suddenly, what once seemed impossible to question becomes something worth examining with patience, reason, and an open mind. And that's the part nobody tells you. Fear hates laughter. It hates confidence. It hates the moment someone smiles and says, "I'm going to think for myself." Because the second that happens, its performance begins to fall apart. So the next time fear knocks on your door, don't rush to let it in. Offer it a chair. Pour it a cup of tea and smile. Because nothing terrifies fear more than someone who refuses to become its puppet. Eyes after all. The Joker doesn't break the chains first. He laughs until everyone realizes they were never locked at all. Doc's people have always believed that if you erase the evidence, you erase the story. That's the illusion. Destroy the paper. Silence the witness, bury the memory, and somehow the truth will disappear with it. Funny, because truth has never been made of paper. It has never depended on one voice, one photograph, one document, or one moment. Truth is stubborn. It has a habit of leaving footprints in places nobody remembers to clean. Think of a fire. You can stamp out the flames, but what about the smoke? It drifts into the sky for everyone to see. People may not know exactly what burned, but they know something happened. They start asking questions. They start looking around. Suddenly, the very act of trying to hide something becomes the reason others begin searching for it. That's how human curiosity works. Tell someone they can't look behind a locked door, and the door becomes more interesting than the entire building. Whisper that a subject should never be discussed, and you've just turned an ordinary conversation into a mystery. The harder someone tries to bury an idea, the more attention they accidentally give it. Silence can sometimes be louder than a confession. But here's where people make a dangerous mistake. Curiosity alone isn't proof. Questions are important, but they aren't the same as answers. A rumor repeated 1,000 times doesn't become reality. Real understanding comes from patience, evidence, and a willingness to change your mind when the facts demand it. Otherwise, you're just replacing one illusion with another. Still, history and everyday life both remind us that the truth often resurfaces in unexpected ways. A forgotten diary, a misplaced recording, a witness who finally finds the courage to speak. A tiny detail everyone ignored until it suddenly connects the pieces of a much larger picture. Sometimes it's not a dramatic revelation at all. Sometimes it's simply time exposing what impatience tried to hide. The strange thing about deception is that it requires constant maintenance. Every lie needs another lie to protect it. Every mask needs another layer of paint. Every performance needs another rehearsal. Eventually, the actor becomes exhausted. They forget which version of the story they told yesterday. Cracks appear. Contradictions slip through. The audience begins noticing things that once seemed invisible. Imagine trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You can push it down for a while. Your arms get tired. The pressure builds. Then, without warning, it explodes back to the surface. The harder you push, the faster it rises. Some truths behave like that, not because they're magical, but because maintaining a false appearance takes more effort than simply facing reality. People often think power belongs to the loudest voice in the room. I disagree. The loudest voice usually has the most to prove. Real confidence doesn't shout. It doesn't panic when questioned. It welcomes honest examination because facts don't fear investigation. Only fragile stories collapse under the weight of sincere curiosity. And that's why it's important to stay grounded. Don't mistake drama for evidence. Don't mistake confidence for certainty. If someone tells you something extraordinary, ask how they know. Look for reliable information. Listen to different perspectives. Be willing to say, "I don't know yet." Those 4 words are often wiser than pretending to know everything. Life isn't a movie where every mystery ends with a shocking twist. Sometimes the explanation is ordinary. Sometimes it's complicated. Sometimes it's disappointing. But whatever the answer may be, it deserves to be discovered honestly, not invented because it sounds exciting. That's the difference between chasing truth and chasing entertainment. The greatest irony is that people spend so much energy trying to control what others believe that they forget one simple fact: reality doesn't care about public opinion. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't ask permission to exist. Sooner or later, What is real has a way of standing on its own, while everything fake begins to wobble under its own weight. And when the curtain finally falls, don't look for the loudest applause. Listen for the laughter echoing through the empty theater, because the joker already knew the best punchline wasn't hiding the truth. It was watching everyone realize they were applauding the illusion all along. Have you ever noticed that the most convincing masks are never made of plastic? They're made of confidence. They're made of polished speeches, perfect smiles, expensive suits, and carefully rehearsed words. People see a calm face and assume there must be an honest heart behind it. That's the trick. The greatest illusion isn't making people believe a lie. It's making them believe they don't need to question it. Every stage has actors. Every city has performers. Every organization, every family, every workplace, every circle of friends has people playing roles. Some wear the mask of the hero. Others wear the mask of the victim. Some become the wise leader, while others become the loyal follower. The mask itself isn't always bad. We all wear different faces depending on the situation. We smile when we're hurting. We say, "I'm fine," even when we're falling apart. Masks are part of being human. The problem begins when the mask becomes more important than the person wearing it. Imagine a grand ballroom filled with beautifully dressed guests. The music is perfect. The lights sparkle. Everyone is laughing. Everyone looks happy. But beneath every elegant mask is a different emotion. One person is terrified. Another is jealous. Someone else feels guilty. Another is simply exhausted. From across the room, they all look exactly the same. That's the funny thing about appearances. They're designed to be seen, not understood. People often confuse popularity with integrity. They believe that if enough people admire someone, then that person must be trustworthy. But applause isn't evidence. A crowd can cheer for a magician while completely missing the hidden card in his sleeve. Charisma can attract attention, but it doesn't automatically reveal character. That's why first impressions are powerful and sometimes misleading. The Joker always found that amusing. Society spends years teaching people how to look successful, but very little time teaching them how to be honest with themselves. We polish our profiles, edit our photos, rehearse our conversations, and hide every crack that might reveal we're imperfect. Everyone wants to appear fearless while secretly carrying fears no one else can see. Power has an interesting relationship with appearances. In any setting, whether it's a classroom, a business, or a community, people often judge confidence before they judge evidence. A person who speaks loudly may seem more convincing than someone who quietly presents facts. But volume has never been proof. Confidence has never guaranteed correctness. Sometimes the quietest voice in the room has spent the most time searching for the truth. That's why critical thinking matters so much. Instead of accepting or rejecting ideas based on appearances alone, ask questions. What supports this claim? Is there evidence? Are there different viewpoints worth considering? Curiosity isn't disrespect. It's responsibility. A healthy society isn't built on blind trust or blind suspicion. It's built on people willing to think carefully before reaching conclusions. Masks also become prisons. Wear one long enough, and eventually you forget what your real face looks like. Pretending to be perfect every single day is exhausting. Pretending to know everything leaves no room to learn. Pretending to be strong every moment leaves no space to heal. The performance becomes your identity, and suddenly you're no longer living your life. You're protecting a character you've created. The strangest part is that people often fear authenticity more than deception. Honesty makes us vulnerable. It exposes flaws, mistakes, and uncertainty. Yet those imperfections are what make us human. Someone willing to admit, "I was wrong," usually deserves more respect than someone who insists they're always right. Growth begins where pretending ends. Look closely at the world around you, not with suspicion, but with awareness. Appreciate kindness when you see it. Respect evidence when it's presented. Don't assume every smile hides bad intentions, but don't assume every polished image reveals the whole story either. Learn to separate appearance from substance. Learn to value actions more than performances, because every mask, no matter how beautiful, eventually slips. Time has a way of revealing what makeup cannot cover, and what rehearsed words cannot forever conceal. The spotlight fades, the music stops, and sooner or later, everyone has to face the mirror without an audience. And when that final mask hits the floor, don't gasp. Don't run, just smile. Because the Joker always knew the funniest face in the room was the one that forgot it was wearing a mask in the first place. There comes a moment in every story when silence stops being silent. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no dramatic alarm, no flashing lights, no giant sign announcing that everything is about to change. It begins with a whisper. One question. One conversation. One person deciding they're no longer satisfied with easy answers. That's how movement starts, not with a crowd, but with a single step. The strange thing about ideas is that they behave like water. You can build walls around them, redirect them, or slow them down for a while, but if an idea has enough curiosity behind it, it keeps searching for another path. It flows through conversations, books, classrooms, families, and friendships. It changes shape without losing its essence. That's why thoughtful discussion has always been one of humanity's greatest strengths. Of course, not every idea deserves to be believed. Some are true. Some are mistaken. Some are deliberately misleading. That's why an open mind must always travel with a careful mind. Curiosity without evidence becomes fantasy. Skepticism without fairness becomes cynicism. Wisdom lies somewhere in the middle, where people are willing to ask difficult questions, while also accepting honest answers when the facts point in a different direction. Funny, isn't it? People often believe information spreads because it's true. Not always. Sometimes it spreads because it's emotional. Sometimes because it's entertaining. Sometimes because it confirms what people already wanted to believe. That's why the loudest story isn't necessarily the most accurate one. The quiet voice supported by evidence often takes longer to be heard, but it has a better chance of lasting. Imagine dropping a single pebble into a calm lake. At first, the ripple seems small, almost meaningless. But the circles keep expanding, touching places the pebble itself could never reach. One thoughtful conversation can inspire another. One honest question can encourage someone else to think more deeply. Progress rarely arrives through noise alone. It often grows through patient reflection shared between ordinary people. The Joker would probably laugh at how desperately people chase certainty. Everyone wants immediate answers. They want every mystery solved before sunset and every question wrapped in a neat little box. Reality isn't usually that generous. Sometimes the truth is complicated. Sometimes it's incomplete. Sometimes it changes as new evidence appears. Accepting uncertainty isn't weakness. It's intellectual honesty. Have you noticed how quickly people choose sides? Before hearing every perspective, before examining every piece of information, they rush to declare victory. Labels replace conversations. Assumptions replace understanding. The world becomes divided into heroes and villains, as if every story were written in black and white. But life enjoys painting with shades of gray. The more closely you look, the more complicated people become. That's why independent thinking matters. It doesn't mean rejecting everything you're told. It means evaluating ideas on their merits. Listen carefully. Compare sources. Be willing to say, "I need more information before I decide." That sentence may not sound dramatic, but it protects you from becoming a prisoner of your own assumptions. Real change begins inside the mind long before it appears in the world. The moment someone replaces blind certainty with genuine curiosity, a door opens. They become harder to manipulate through fear, easier to persuade with evidence, and more willing to learn from people who disagree with them respectfully. That's not weakness. That's growth. And here's the beautiful irony. Once curiosity starts moving, it inspires more curiosity. Questions lead to research. Research leads to understanding. Understanding leads to better questions. The journey never truly ends because learning itself has no finish line. Every answer reveals another mystery waiting patiently in the distance. So don't chase excitement for its own sake. Chase clarity. Don't collect rumors like trophies. Collect evidence. Don't fear changing your mind when better information arrives. That's not losing. That's becoming wiser than you were yesterday. The strongest mind isn't the one that never changes. It's the one that changes for the right reasons. Because eventually every conversation leaves an echo. Every thoughtful question creates another ripple. Every honest search for understanding reaches someone you may never even meet. And when those ripples become waves, the stage lights begin to flicker, the audience grows quiet, and somewhere in the darkness, the Joker starts clapping. Because the funniest trick was never making people believe everything. It was watching them finally learn how to think for themselves.